Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The setting sun bathed Central Park in a golden light, weaving reflections on the fountains and immaculate lawns. Jonathan Whittaker, a billionaire known for his colossal fortune and impassive demeanor, paced the paved path, a cup of coffee in hand, absorbed in his thoughts of figures and contracts. Suddenly, a soft laugh caught his attention. Around a bend in the path, he saw a black woman in her 30s, with bright eyes and a genuine smile, holding her son's hand. The child, clearly suffering from a motor disability, moved with difficulty, but his mother, full of energy and gentleness, guided him with patience and tenderness. Then, something unexpected happened. The mother put on some music on her phone and began to dance with her son. The movements were clumsy, sometimes jerky, but they were imbued with a harmony and joy that transcended any technique. Jonathan, who had always lived in a world of elitism, protocol, and social distancing, felt his heart sink. He watched these two souls vibrate together, and for the first time in a long time, he felt that everything he owned, his yachts, his buildings, his 7-0 figures, was worthless compared to this authenticity, this silent strength that emanated from this woman and her son. At that precise moment, his perception of the world shifted. Luxury, power, reputation, everything now seemed empty in the face of the simple but brilliant truth of what he saw: love, resilience, the beauty of a life fully lived despite hardships. The next morning, Jonathan Whittaker couldn't shake the image of the mother and son from his mind. In his penthouse with its tinted windows and perfect lines, surrounded by the cold gleam of steel and marble, he felt strangely empty. The figures, the contracts, the meetings, everything suddenly seemed meaningless. He made an impulsive decision: he would return to the park. Not to invest, not to observe like a mere spectator, but to understand what he had seen the day before. Perhaps it was simply an impression, a fleeting moment of sentimentality. But something deep inside him screamed that it wasn't. Upon arriving, he walked along the paths to the main fountain, and there he saw them again. The woman, dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, was helping her son walk across the grass. The child was laughing, and this time, he was trying out a little dance, his trembling hand in his mother's. Jonathan felt his breath catch. He moved forward slowly, trying not to seem intrusive. The woman looked up, and their eyes met. Her eyes were a deep black, but reflected a warmth and strength Jonathan had never encountered in his world of meetings and contracts. "Hello. I didn't mean to bother you," he said hesitantly. The woman smiled, a frank and bright smile, and replied, "You're not disturbing anything. My name is Mariah, and this is my son, Isaiah." Jonathan felt an indescribable emotion rising, as if every wall he had built around himself for years was beginning to crumble. I saw your dance yesterday," he said, almost embarrassed. "It was incredible. You have such energy, such strength." Mariah looked at him, intrigued but without judgment. "Thank you. It's not easy, but every day I find a way to make Isaiah happy. And sometimes that means dancing in the middle of an empty park." Isaiah raised his arms towards Jonathan, and with a little laugh, said, "Hello. Will you dance with us?" Jonathan felt taken aback. Dancing? Him? The cold, calculating billionaire? But then he saw the trust and innocence in the child's eyes and a radiant smile on Mariah's face. He nodded slowly, and Mariah held out her hand. Their steps were clumsy, hesitant, but each movement seemed to erase years of cynicism and coldness from Jonathan's soul. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel, to be touched by a simple and true beauty. When the music stopped, he felt both light and deeply shaken. Mariah and Isaiah were watching him, smiling, and Jonathan knew he had just crossed a threshold he could never forget. I would like to learn," he said finally, his voice trembling. "Not for the spectacle, but to understand." Mariah smiled, nodded, and replied, "Then you are welcome. Here, every step counts, every smile counts, everything else can wait." And that day, in the middle of the park, Jonathan Whittaker understood that his life would never be the same again. In the days that followed, Jonathan couldn't resist returning to the park. Every morning, he positioned himself discreetly at a distance, observing Mariah and Isaiah. He saw how she helped him walk, how she laughed at his little clumsiness, how she transformed every challenge into a moment of shared connection. Jonathan, used to measuring the world in numbers and results, was beginning to understand that some riches cannot be calculated. One morning, Mariah noticed it. "You come back often," she said, her arms crossed but an amused smile on her face. I realize I have a lot to learn," Jonathan replied, embarrassed. Perhaps you could teach me," he added after a silence. Mariah looked at him intently. Her eyes shone with a mixture of caution and curiosity. "Very well," she said finally. "But you must understand one thing, with Isaiah, nothing is ever simple, nothing is ever quick. If you want to learn, you must be patient. And honest." Jonathan nodded. He knew that his life as a billionaire had often made him impatient and demanding. But he felt ready to change. In the following weeks, he began spending time with them, not as an employee or a patron, but as a friend. He discovered simple joys, helping Isaiah with his homework, laughing at his little mishaps, sharing stories about his childhood. Each moment strengthened a bond he never thought possible. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench, Isaiah rested his head on Jonathan's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for dancing with us." Jonathan felt his eyes fill with tears. That simple word, that pure gratitude, was worth all the fortunes in the world. Mariah looked at him, a gentle smile on her lips. "You see, it's not the dancing, or the music, or even the money that counts. It's the presence, the patience, the love. You're already learning." That day, Jonathan understood that his worldview had changed. Judgments, competition, the relentless pursuit of prestige, all of that now seemed superficial. He had found something more precious, the raw truth of life, embodied by Mariah and Isaiah. As they walked home together, Jonathan realized that this chance encounter was no accident. It was a turning point, an awakening, and perhaps the beginning of a path he never imagined he would take. As the weeks went by, Jonathan Whittaker became a regular visitor in Mariah and Isaiah's lives. But he soon realized that appearances could be deceiving. Helping a disabled child required more than goodwill, it demanded constant presence, infinite patience, and a humility he had never had to summon in his business dealings. One morning, when he arrived with a bag full of supplies and educational toys for Isaiah, Mariah greeted him with a serious look. "Are you ready today?" she asked. "Ready for what?" replied Jonathan, a little nervously. "For the real challenges. Dancing and laughing is one thing. But facing real obstacles, Isaiah's moments of frustration, that's where patience is tested," she said, looking him straight in the eyes. Isaiah sat on the floor, a grimace on his face. He refused to participate in his usual exercise. Jonathan gently knelt beside him. "Hey, big guy, do you remember how we did that step yesterday? We can try it again together." "I promise it will be fun," Jonathan said gently. The child shook his head, stubborn. Mariah watched silently, her hands resting on her knees. She knew Jonathan needed to learn to manage these moments when the child's willpower exceeded that of the adult. Jonathan took a deep breath. He understood that his usual methods, persuading, convincing, imposing, didn't work here. What was needed was empathy, listening, and above all, accepting failure without frustration. "Okay," he said calmly, "we'll just sit here and breathe together, without rushing." Isaiah watched Jonathan, intrigued by his calm. Little by little, he reached out, then let his hands slide into Jonathan's. And, slowly but surely, they resumed the exercise. Jonathan realized that the real victory wasn't making the child succeed, but creating a bond of trust, showing him that he was never alone in facing difficulties. At the end of the day, Mariah placed a hand on Jonathan's shoulder. "Do you see the difference? You didn't change the situation overnight. You were just there. And that's what Isaiah takes away from it. You're starting to understand what it truly means to love and support someone. Jonathan felt an intense emotion wash over him. In his world, everything had to be fast, efficient, profitable. Here, every gesture, every smile, every shared silence was more valuable than all his material possessions. As they returned from the park, Jonathan knew that he had just entered unknown territory, where power and money were powerless. He had become, for the first time in his life, a humble man, simply human. But he was still unaware that greater obstacles would soon test his sincerity, difficult choices, external judgments, and perhaps even the fear of losing what he had just found. Jonathan Whittaker thought the hardest part was understanding and supporting Isaiah through his daily challenges. But he would soon discover that the outside world could be just as ruthless. One afternoon, while accompanying Mariah and Isaiah to the rehabilitation center, Jonathan felt the weight of others' stares. The whispers, the surprised glances, sometimes even critical ones, bothered him more than he would have thought. Some parents looked at him as if he didn't belong there, and some staff members seemed skeptical of his sudden interest in a disabled child. "Don't worry about them," Mariah whispered to him as she passed by. "People often judge what they don't understand. What matters is what we're doing here, for Isaiah, not what others think." Jonathan nodded, but he felt a simmering anger. In his life as a billionaire, he had learned to influence people through money or power. Here, those tools were useless. He had to confront his own limitations, and those of society. Later that day, an incident occurred. Isaiah, tired and frustrated, knocked over his pot of paint during an art workshop. An educator raised his voice, impatient and exasperated. "That's not how you do it. You need to concentrate." Jonathan felt a surge of anger. He approached calmly. "Wait, leave me alone. Let Isaiah explore in his own way. You can help him, not break him." The educator looked at him incredulously. Mariah placed a hand on his arm. "Jonathan, breathe. Show them how patience changes everything." He took a deep breath and knelt beside Isaiah. Together, they cleaned up the mess, laughing. Gradually, the other staff members began to see things differently. Jonathan understood that you can never change the world with anger, only presence and consistency can earn respect. After this trying day, Mariah spoke to Jonathan in the car. "You see, it's not just about Isaiah. It's about everyone who thinks they know what normality, success, and value are. And every time we intervene with patience and love, we bring a little order to this chaos." Jonathan felt a new determination awaken within him. He knew he had to invest more, not to show off, not to right a wrong, but to participate in this subtle but real transformation. That evening, alone in his penthouse, he reflected. Challenges were coming from all sides, judgments, misunderstandings, prejudices, but he knew he couldn't back down. He had finally found a cause worth more than all the gold in the world. And he understood that the true test of his commitment would not only measure his patience, but his ability to allow himself to be transformed by Mariah and Isaiah. A few months had passed since Jonathan's first meeting with Mariah and Isaiah. What had begun as a timid curiosity had become a deep commitment. Every morning, he joined Mariah at the park, helped Isaiah with his exercises, laughed at his clumsiness, and shared his own simple and authentic childhood stories. One afternoon, Mariah suggested something new. "Today we're going outside, but not for the usual exercises. I want you to see something, Jonathan." They arrived at a small open-air stage where a local festival for disabled children was being held. Mariah and Isaiah went up on stage, followed by Jonathan, still hesitant. Then, to everyone's surprise, Jonathan began to dance with them. His movements were clumsy, but sincere, and each step expressed a newfound humility and joy. The crowd applauded, but Jonathan wasn't seeking approval. He looked at Isaiah, beaming with happiness, and Mariah, proud and serene. In that precise moment, he understood that his life had changed forever. The contracts, the meetings, the wealth, all of it had been superficial compared to the richness of those shared moments. After the festival, they sat on a bench, the setting sun illuminating their faces. Isaiah fell asleep on his mother's shoulder, exhausted but happy. Jonathan watched them, a gentle smile on his lips, and said, "You taught me something I will never forget. Patience, love, courage, all of that is worth more than anything I have ever possessed." Mariah placed her hand on his. "And you showed us that wealth is not only what we possess. It can also be in what we give, in what we share." Jonathan smiled, feeling a profound calm for the first time. He knew his life would never be the same again, and he was grateful. He had discovered that true greatness is not measured in wealth or power, but in the capacity to love, to be present, and to transform the world around you, one small step at a time. And as night fell on the park, Jonathan Whittaker, Mariah, and Isaiah walked together, bound by a complicity that surpassed anything money or status could ever offer. For Jonathan, the world had finally found its true color, that of compassion, humanity, and shared joy.